Padwo Audick, and I'm excited to be on the Keith Andrew Network.
My name is Keith Andrew, and you're watching the Keith Andrew Network. We sit down with Dara Audick. That's right, Dara Audick. Today on the Keith Andrew Network for episode 1247. Ms. Audick is known for ESPN, Fox, Lifetime, CBS, Discovery, and so many great networks. She's also known for being an award-winning producer, director, and writer. We're going to hear so much of her story here only on the Keith Andrew Network. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let's jump right into it. I'm your host, Keith Andrew, and you're watching Breaking Barriers, brought to you by the Keith Andrew Network. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. This is airing and streaming on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and all social media. So I'm here with a great guest. She is an award-winning producer, director, and writer. And I just want to say thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
No, the honor's all mine. And some of your about you, the will of your background, so really caught my interest, is you worked with and you produced so many great projects, and we're going to talk about the work that you worked with. But some of the companies that you actually worked with, I would like to know a little about. You know, I saw, for an example, ESPN, Fox, Lifetime. Those are some big names.
Yeah, so I actually got my start in the 1980s, a long time ago, in advertising. And I did that for about 8 years, and then went to work for a small production company in Washington, D.C., and we mostly did like healthcare and environmental films. And then I went out on my own as a freelancer, and that's when I started working for the different networks. So I worked on the X Games in the very beginning of the X Games for ESPN. I worked for different sports networks doing mostly non-mainstream sports. So things like rollerblading, skateboarding, a little bit of, well, especially with the X Games. So, you know, all of the like extreme sports stuff. And then I ended up doing a lot of freelance work for National Geographic and Discovery for years, actually, through them directly, and also for some small production companies that also did productions for them. And then I went to work full-time at Discovery for a few years before going back out on my own again in 2007. Yeah, 2007.
Well, I'm going to throw some funny questions at you, and you can throw it back at me. I have no cards up my sleeve, but the one that caught my interest is that you were born and raised from Virginia, and Virginia is actually the home state of TNA Hall of Famer Mickie James. Do you like professional wrestling?
You know what? I'm actually born in New York and raised in Maryland, but I came to Virginia much later in my life. It was when I met my husband. So I didn't move to Virginia until I was in my 30s. And I don't know anything about professional wrestling. I'm sorry to say, I don't.
You're not missing much. But I saw something, correct me if I'm wrong. You went to Santa Barbara University, correct?
I went to Antioch. Okay, so I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Maryland in College Park, where I studied theater and psychology. And then I have two boys. When my older son went to college, I was in my 40s, and I went and did a master's in film. And then later on in my 50s, went back and did a master's of fine arts at Antioch University in Santa Barbara. And now the program is located in Los Angeles.
And you also went to American University as well, right?
So American is where I did my master's in film, and it's also where I teach.
Oh, nice. Actually, you bring up a good subject because you do teach. Have you worked with people with, besides me, obviously, have you worked with people with disabilities? And for people who have disabilities who want to work with you, are you open to it?
Yeah, I actually have done a lot of work with disabilities. So I want to say my first project, I can't remember the year, but it was a long time. It was a while ago. It was many, many years ago. My first project, I did a piece for a camp a summer camp in Maryland that worked with kids with special needs. And I did a video for them. That was really the first time. And then in 2009, I did a whole series of videos with the Department of Labor with their Office of Disability Employment Policy, which is a great office, a great program. And I did a series of videos on working with people with disabilities through customized employment. And what customized employment is finding matches for people with disabilities so they can do work that feels good to them and that they can feel successful at. So instead of throwing them into any job, they match them with the right job.
No, you're absolutely right. And I had so many great questions I want to tell you, but actually, you remind me of an organization I used to work with called Occupations Invested, where they're pretty much they would find people work like in retail. But what you're describing, it sounds a little bit better because you're not just gonna randomly throw someone into a job and hope for the best. You actually sit down and say, okay, tell me what you're good at, and we can dictate a little more. So it's you're finding the right groove to the job. You're not just saying, oh, hey, we're just here to give you a job and hope for the best.
That's exactly right. And it's really important. And I'm glad we're talking about this because it's very important. You know, everybody has abilities. They're just a range of different abilities. And so what the Office of Disability Employment Policy is able to really perfect is how do you go through a process of discovery, which is what you're talking about, to find out all of the skills and interests of the person with disabilities and really find the right job for them. And it was amazing to me the kinds of jobs that people were doing because they went through this process of discovery. Later on, so I worked with them quite a bit. Then years later, I ended up doing another, it was a series, yeah, where we worked with veterans who had come back and had disabilities because of, battle injuries. Some of them had TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, and things like that. So it was the same sort of process, figuring out what are they good at, what interests them, and matching them to a job. So I'll give you an example. There was a guy we did a profile on in Cleveland, Ohio, who came back from the war and he had a traumatic brain injury. And they didn't think that he could work at all, but he loved numbers, he loved statistics, and he loved baseball. And so they got him a job with the Akron Rubber Ducks, being like the scorekeeper in the box, and he excelled at it. He was invaluable to them, and I think he ended up actually working for one of the major league teams. I'm not 100% sure, but it was a really good match. And so they never would have figured that out if they hadn't have found the right person to do the discovery process with him and, get to what really would work for him, but also to fill a need with this minor league baseball team that needed help.
I mean,
So
shit.
it was a win-win.
I mean, shit. I live. I wish you worked in New York State and where I live, because I give you an experience of occupations. I direct. Oh, what are your hobbies? What are you good at? Well, I have a talk show. I'm really good at it. Doing it for 13 years. Thanks to you, it's up over 1,247 episodes. And I do
Wow.
have some great ideas of what to talk to you about. But then you're like, oh, okay, so you like making videos. Unfortunately, we can't do something like that. How about you be a custodian? I mean, all right, I get a job's a job, but from how you're explaining from what you're doing, you sound like a perfect match for me than just going to an organization where they don't really know anything and just saying, we're just going to stick you here and like hope for the best. You can't really do that because you're setting yourself up for failure.
Absolutely. No, as you know what, I can actually, I need to go back into my files, but I can find the people who would know the people where you live that you might be able to talk to who could do discovery if you're interested. But that's the really important piece, is finding the right organization that does discovery, and then they have access to these other jobs that you wouldn't know about on your own.
No, absolutely. That's why it's very important to build connection. Never burn bridges. Always, even if you don't like somebody, smile, be respectful. Cause you're going to meet the same people going up as you are going back down. But the one thing I do caught my interest, and I really like the picture of everything that you talk about, every proceed in the film that you're working on. What can you tell us about it, and what was the story behind it?
So I'm working with my colleague, Professor Bridget Maher, and she's a full professor at American University. I'm an adjunct there. I've been there for a long time as an adjunct in the film department. And so our film is called We Persist, and it focuses on three women of color who are doing social justice and restorative justice work around the country and a little bit internationally as well. One of them is an elder in the Lakota tribe. Another one is the youngest and first, I believe, first youngest Black female mayor in Golden Valley, Minnesota. And then we have a Palestinian American peace builder who has been very involved in the United Nations and the US Institute of Peace, working on peace building in the Middle East and other countries as well.
No, it's funny you should mention Middle East, but we can save that for towards the end. But let me just ask you, you are an award-winning actor and producer, and that is absolutely tremendous. Who inspired you to become a producer and writer?
So I've always actually been writing. I started writing when I was like 6 years old. Um, and I always wrote short stories, and I've always loved writing. It's come kind of naturally for me, which has been very fortunate. Um, I wanted to be an actor on the stage. That's really what I wanted to do originally when I went to college, way back when, as an undergraduate. But it's really hard to make a living that way. So I had a career counselor after I came out of college that suggested that I tried to work in the media industry with my writing, and that was how I got a job. Was I put together a portfolio, and I got a job as a copywriter in advertising. And it was through my work in advertising that I learned to produce and direct. So it came later. It came
No,
later.
so the first one I want to ask you, like I said, you have to know the right people and point you in the right direction. That's all it really comes down to. But I find this one, it's really, I don't want to go back and forth. So this is actually covers both subjects of producing and writing. So instead of saying this question, repeating it twice, I'm just gonna say it's for both to make it easier. Also,
Okay.
save a little time. So, what is difficult about being a professional producer?
Hmm, that's a good question. Very good question. Um, so the producer's role varies depending on what area you work on in the industry. So as a television producer, you're responsible for the content and the crew and the look and feel of the show. Sometimes you're working separately with the director. Sometimes you are the director. It depends on the show, the series. Especially in nonfiction, which is what my background is, you would do both. Whereas in fiction, you probably work with a bigger team, or you do work with a bigger team. Um, so you have to be good at managing people. You also have to be really good at managing money because you're responsible for the budget, and you have to be very fiscally responsible for that money. And then if you're working as an independent producer and you're not necessarily in a studio environment, then you have to raise the money and that takes a lot of knowing the right people and a lot of networking. So it,
No,
it's a
I can
it's a big
relate to
job.
I can relate to that. I've been doing this for thanks to you 13 years, and I'm still on the independence. I'm still working my way up. And by I produce it, I write it, I direct it, and but sometimes you can be the jack of all trades, you can be the Jill of all trades, but it can be really overwhelming when you do every single thing yourself.
You have to have good people on your team, and that I think that's what makes a good producer is knowing the right people to be on your team. It's definitely not a solo endeavor. Um, I've
Oh,
had the opportunity to work with some amazing people in my career who I respect, who are talented, and not just that, they're kind. And that's really important. You don't want to work with people who are nasty or mean. You want to work with nice people, people who support each other, one another. That's very important.
I want to go back to your film and to some of the big names that we did mention, like I'm looking at my list real fast where I put it down somewhere. You were like Lifetime, and let me ask you about this. What were some of your favorite films or scripts that you wrote and produced for Lifetime and these different networks? The reason I ask that is my real question I wanted to tell you is how do you know when you delivered a high quality performance? Because you mentioned these different networks before. Well, I mentioned these different networks before, but for each one individually, how do you feel that you delivered a high quality performance? It's like, you know what? I think for Lifetime, I really nailed this one. Or I think for CBS, it could have been better, but it was good.
Yeah, that's an interesting question too. So when you're delivering a project to a network, there are a lot of people above you at the network who are the eyes, are looking at the thing many times before it ever gets to air. Many, many times. And so you get a lot of notes, and you have to be good at taking those critical notes and incorporating it into revising the project. So it's rare that you would just put something out on a network that hasn't been vetted many times over. Then the bottom line with a network or streamer is that they're going to be looking at the views, right? So a lot of times, I remember when I used to work for National Geographic Channel or even Lifetime, you know, I did a show for them that I really was proud of called Women Behind the Wheel. I was the writer for that show, and I did some field producing as well. It was a great show about women race car drivers, really great show. And we all loved it. We were all really proud of it. It was a big team effort to get it on the air. But if the network comes back and says, well, we didn't get enough views, then it feels like you didn't accomplish as much as you thought you had. But if they come back and say, oh, people are watching it, we're getting a great response, then it feels like you really fulfilled your mission.
No, I can relate. You know, when I first started my talk show, it was all about making a statement that I don't usually say my quote, but why not? We're on the subject. When I first created a talk show, I wanted to show people that the whole point of my talk show was to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to show you that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. It's just prove to them and get them out to something. So my mission right out of the gates was to prove to them, hey, I can make a body of work. I can make a house of cards. Not to toot my own horn, 13 years, 1,000 episodes. But like you said, you need a team saying, okay, that's great. You have the body of work, you have a strong message. But along the way, and I kind of feel this way, there's a disconnect because you have not really the numbers. You have people who support you. You have a library of work and you have a strong message, but it's kind of like a heartbeat. It goes beep, beep, and pause. And it's kind of like, where is that disconnect? So the question I want to ask you is everything that you've seen of me, where do you think the disconnect comes in?
Well, nowadays the disconnect is always in the viewership. Um, and it's really hard, you know, if you don't have the promotional dollars behind promoting your program, it's hard to get the word out. This is the same problem that independent producers are having all across the board is you have to do self-promotion or you've got to find the money to back not only the project but to back all your marketing efforts, which can be very expensive. The studios spend probably half, if not more, of the budgets that they spend on films promoting those films. Sometimes they spend more than the film. It just depends. So the disconnect is there's so much media now on so many different outlets. How do you get seen? Unless you have big money behind you promoting, it's really hard to do.
No, you're absolutely right. But the one thing I do have, and a lot of people like to say I have an edge, I don't have a chip on my shoulder or anything. A lot of people say I have my head up my ass. But the one thing I have is the disability. Now, when you think of people with disabilities, you don't think of them having a talk show. Or, there's a wrestler named Zach Allen. He has one leg, but he became a professional wrestler. He's an inspiration. There are people who have disabilities who are comedians. But when you think of a talk show, and yes, there are some actors out there who are big names, but you wouldn't really know they had disabilities unless they said something.
Right.
So I think, well, for an example, Jackie Chan doesn't have a disability as far as I know of, but he can't read scripts, so he improvs. So I was like, okay, I can relate to that because I can't really read and write, but if you give me an opportunity, I can improv on that. But everyone that you've seen on YouTube for the past, what, YouTube's been around for 20 years, 21 years. If you
Mhm.
type in talk show host with a disability, there's really no one that really pops up. Yes, there's people who pretend to have a talk show. There's a lot of people who have a podcast. There's a lot of people who stream. But the fact they advertise themselves as talk show hosts, podcast hosts with a disability, I take pride in knowing I'm actually the first to do that. Because a lot of people would say you tell people you have a disability, it's kind of a red flag. But now it's kind of like, okay, so hey, yo, you have a disability. You want to fight about it? We can fight about it. You have to make yourself different. You have to give yourself what makes you different from, and you're right. The internet is saturated with content and videos of so many people doing the same thing. I counted on TikTok 30 people who are a freaking psychic doing the same thing. Copy paste, copy paste. You need to show people that you can be legit, or what, you can show people you're the OG of what you're doing. You need to show people this is an original content, never seen, never heard before, and you're going to get value for your buck. And that's the biggest thing. That's the struggle. And as you mentioned, you were a producer and so many other things, great things. But it's saturation. It's, yeah, there's a lot, but it's you get lost in the shuffle.
Well, because you either have to have something that's very informational or educational that people don't know, and they're like, oh, I really want to learn about that. That's interesting. That enriches my world. Or, and it could be or, you have something that's highly entertaining that takes them out of their lives and gives them an escape. So I think that's really what media, we're not talking about news. News is different. But, if you watch the shows on Netflix or Amazon Prime or HBO or Disney or whatever, either you're learning something or you're being entertained. Um, so if you can put together something that does both, then you're going to cut through the clutter more quickly.
No, I agree. The last subject I want to talk to you about, because I know we said this before, you're an award-winning producer, been on big networks. So I think this one actually resonates to this conversation. AI. How do
Mm,
you feel about AI being involved in the entertainment world? And do you think it's going to take jobs away from people?
it already is um, taking jobs away. It's changing the makeup of writers' rooms where people work on series in groups. AI is doing like the first draft, and so it's less writers in the room. I feel like we can't avoid it. I mean, we have to learn how to work with it. But one thing it doesn't have, which we have as humans, is heart. It doesn't have heart. I mean, it's approximating heart sometimes, or it tries to, but it's not the same. And so one of my mentors keeps saying, we have to create from our heart and we have to create from an authentic place. And I don't think that AI is there. And I'm not sure if it will get there anytime soon.
No, absolutely. I do have a couple questions for you off the air. But wrapping up, it was a real honor and privilege. How can our fans and listeners get in touch with you?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn. If they want to follow our film, which would be awesome if they would follow our film, We Persist is the name of the film. And we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're on TikTok, and we have a website, We Persist Film, so they could find me there with my colleague, and that would be great.
No, absolutely. All that will be on the screen. With that being said, it was a real honor and privilege having you back on the show. I can't wait for part 2. And this was originally supposed to be a double interview. When your partner is all better, she's more than welcome to be on the show. I would love to have her. But wrapping up, this will be shared on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. The first 3 minutes of this episode will be on TikTok and Instagram. But wrapping up, it was a real honor and privilege meeting you. Thank you for supporting the KeithAndrewNetwork, and in return, you get a full half hour to share your message, say anything you want, talk about anything you want. We're here to network and communicate and support one another. But wrapping up, until we meet again, I'll catch you later. Thank you, and have a good night. Message is all that